Coming up, the New York Football Giants have big decisions at the QB spot. Is Daniel Jones on his way out? Could Russell Wilson be on his way in? And is J.J. McCarthy lurking in the draft wings? We break it all down coming up next. Yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Makowitz. He's healthy. He's wealthy. He's wise. He's feeling the off-season juices flowing as the New York Football Giants come out of the combine. Free agency coming. Deadline looming, as we know, for Saquon Barkley and that tag. We'll cover that as well. But you may notice it's only Tuesday, and you're already seeing us for the second time this week. That's because there's just too many really good narratives, timely stuff that we want to cover here, starting with the QB room for the New York Football Giants. We're going to get into Russell Wilson in a minute. But before we do anything, we, of course, let everybody out there know, Andy, and you know as well, that today's episode is going to be brought to you by Personam. Personam is an AI-driven cyber threat detection engine. Personam improves the vision into your network security environment and allows you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms just can't do. Personam is always vigilant and always learning. Will we be always vigilant and learning, Andy, when it comes to Daniel Jones? Rich Eisen, of all the people to break the news, love Rich Eisen, love him on the NFL Network. And he just kind of drops on his radio show, little bomb, little nugget. Hey, Daniel Jones, Giants, we're done with you.
Oh, man. I mean, coming out from Rich Eisen, obviously more of a national reporter than a local reporter for the Giants, comes out and basically says, in his segment of like 5 things I was hearing at the combine. Number 3 on the list was, and this is a quote directly from Rich Eisen, the Giants are absolutely done with Daniel Jones. He also went on to say, might have to play him this year, but that ain't it. And they feel that ain't it. The words I heard at the combine multiple times were buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
So, Rich Eisen, not known as a guy that does like the hot take stuff, usually a guy that's pretty tuned into like what people are saying in the league. Hearing that, does that change your mind on anything? Does it enlighten you on anything? Like, what does Rich Eisen talking about Daniel Jones saying they're done signify to you?
Well, here's how I know we're going to get in the weeds on this because Andy believes in the narratives and what they serve or do not serve. So I'll let you get to that point, and I'll explain why it falls apart, I think, from a human level. But I do take this. You have to take this at some level at face value. Whether or not the injuries are its own thing, whether or not the Giants thought that Daniel Jones could be developed underneath Brian Daboll, here's a big takeaway. Whatever he accomplished the year prior, even prior to his injury this past season, the Giants got another sample size. So that line about buyer's remorse, I can very much see that being Brian Daboll, the Giants looking at Daniel Jones, getting some samples. What do we talk about when he was healthy and playing? Man, it's weird. A year ago, he worked through his progression so much better. Like, we know the offensive line and all that stuff, but it does seem like he's regressed a little bit. That had to have been alarming even before the injury. So, devil in the details about maybe if you got even more information, it would say something like, because we can't rely on his health to go along with some concerns about his play. But I'm not shocked about this. And I it's a very reasonable take to be hearing potentially coming out of the combine. But Andy, you believe it's all a bunch of, let's just call it BS.
Well, I don't necessarily think it's BS. But here is where my stance is, and I'm in a drastically different stratosphere than everyone else. I feel like Mugatu taking crazy pills from Zoolander right now. If anyone gets early 2000s reference here, but listen, a week ago at the combine, Joe Shane said, "quote I have faith in Daniel Jones as our starting quarterback." That's what he says to the public. He's obviously said they need to look to bolster the room because Tyrod Taylor is a free agent. They don't necessarily have anyone else under contract. They will look through free agency. They'll look at all the tools, the draft, etc.
Naturally.
But vocally out there, Joe Shane is saying one thing. You are hearing from everywhere, all over the combine, everything else. The Giants are actively looking to potentially move up to one of the top 3 spots. The Giants love the quarterbacks. The Giants are interviewing all of these quarterbacks. The Giants have fallen in love with J.J. McCarthy. Maybe the Giants have to move up to be able to get J.J. McCarthy. Then you're hearing all these people saying the Giants are absolutely done with Daniel Jones. They're out on Daniel Jones. buyer's remorse, wish they never signed the contract, trying to figure out how to get out from under it. That is everything that's happened in the last 7 days since Joe Schoen said Daniel Jones is our starting quarterback. The reason why I just don't understand this overall is because I don't get the benefit to Joe Schoen and the Giants putting this out there and sending everyone what their plan is going to be. Like, the whole idea of the draft is you don't want people to necessarily know what you plan on doing with your pick, because if they do, they can make more informed decisions on whether they need to trade up, whether they need to stay where they are, whether they want to be trade partners with you or not. Like, there's so much that goes into it. And I consider Joe Schoen to be a super bright guy, a guy that never gives the media anything of consequence. And here we sit. The fact that, like, everyone thinks the Giants are airing their dirty laundry and giving the roadmap blueprint to what they're doing at the top of the draft, there has to be something else going on here. There's where my tinfoil hat goes. Go ahead, Adam. Tell me why I'm crazy right now.
Well, the first, see, okay, at a very basic level, here's why, because you're presenting it as, why would the Giants put this information out there? Why would they want it to be out there speculating about how they feel about Daniel Jones? There's no, human beings are fickle in the nature of how they communicate and what they communicate and casual conversations you have. If you think that, like, on every level, by the way, not even just inside the organization, but that Joe Schoen, you think that he isn't shoulder to shoulder with other GMs? Like, we all think about this idea about all these GMs, they're all trying to undercut each other and keep all their dirty secrets, and no one's going to know what they're capable of. They're all calling each other. They're all having the discussions and saying, hey, how are you feeling about the 3rd overall pick, Patriots? Are you considering maybe moving out? Where do you think you are? How have you felt about Mac Jones? There's some chance he ends up being a free agent. Maybe we'd want to take a look at him in our room. This is any NFL team, not just the Giants. All these conversations are going on. So what ends up happening, if I wanted to, like, follow the breadcrumb trail, by the time it gets to the combine and to Rich Eisen, there's like a smattering of people. Assistant GMs, guys in personnel groups, and they go, yeah, actually, I heard a little bit from Bob the other day that the Giants are a little bit, they're not so sure on him, or they like him, but they're not, the health, the production, all those things. Like, it's just human nature that these things spread and get out there. So, and that's not by design necessarily. It just gets out there by accidental conversation, etc. And every team has their, quote, leaks. Not always intentional leaks. Sometimes, shoot, I was over at the water cooler and I accidentally mentioned, it'd be good if we could land JJ, or whatever, whatever the verbiage is. And somebody picks that up and it starts to spread. That to me is the baseline first element of it, right? The other part of it is the idea of Joe Schoen saying, we believe in Daniel Jones. Now, you'll say, well, right, because that doesn't give up anything. It keeps all their cards close to their vest. They could still trade up and get that quarterback. I get that. And also, that can be BS too. That can be Joe Schoen. Like, this narrative at the combine could be accurate or inaccurate. Joe Schoen could be being honest or dishonest. And I still stand firm on March, whatever it is, 5th at 10 a.m., these things don't matter as much now as they're going to a month and a half from now when the draft happens. Like, we are at a place when you also have to fill pages on the byline. Like, there are articles that have to be written. Content has to be made here. So I think you need to take everything with a grain of salt, but every possibility about how the Giants feel is on the table. And I don't think when something like this comes out that you go, well, obviously, if you're hearing that they're done with Daniel Jones, it means they're going to triple down on him. I think that the truth lies somewhere muddled in the middle of all of this.
Listen, I agree with you. I'm not even necessarily saying that Daniel Jones will be the week 1 starter for the Giants. What I am saying is, I find it hard to believe that this is coming directly from the Giants organization saying, like, we really like JJ McCarthy at 6, because it makes no sense. Because if a team then looks and says, if we want JJ McCarthy, then we got to move to 5. The Chargers seem like a good trading option. Let's just move to 5 and get our guy. And
Sure.
Why would you let other teams know that you want it so they have an opportunity to have a more informed choice? Like,
right.
So to me, that's where I just don't understand it. And Joe Schoen doesn't seem like a guy that just, like, is having 12 cocktails, just spouting his mouth off, telling everyone what the roadmap is for the Giants draft.
By the
Now,
way, Rich Eisen also made a comment on the combine. He said, he's like, he's got a shotgun for an arm. Somebody said about a quarterback. He goes, yeah, well, all these coaches and GMs will be shotgunning beers later tonight. Like he made a reference about how like the combine is also a little get together party. Who knows? Maybe Joe Shane he's got some loose lips and he's sinking chips.
well, the only plausible thing I think about on the Giants trade up front is like Joe Shane doesn't have to operate a business and be like, what does it take? Just so that we know like where we stand. And
Right.
also talk to the Raiders who are thinking about trading up. What are you thinking to be able to move up if the guy that you want is there? Like, let's just get framework in place so that I'm not surprised at any decision. And then I actually think it benefits the teams like the New England Patriots or the Commanders who are at 2 or 3 to say, the Giants have already been sniffing around at our pick to make it more valuable for everyone else to say, listen, there's a little bit of competition. So it may not even be coming from the Giants camp. It may be coming from JJ McCarthy's camp, the Patriot camp, the Commanders camp to be able to drum up interest either in their pick or their player.
One final note on this too, and you mentioned it in Rich Eisen's comments. He said it may not be this year, but they're done with Daniel Jones. That's the other part of it. I actually, honestly, like as we're walking through this, that's the most important bullet point about this. This is not actually necessarily informative about what they're going to do in the draft this year or about what they're going to do in free agency. This is just from a high level, and it can inform it if they think they're going to move on. And we've talked about the speculation. You need to get your future quarterback, all those things. But it's more informative about that. We all assume that, hey, the 4-year contract, there's the 2-year out. And we had mentioned this about the money. It actually isn't as damaging, I think, from a dead cap standpoint next year. The 3rd year, there is a way to get out after 2 years and not be that, dead cap punitive for the Giants. So they can go that route and feel pretty comfortable with it. But I think it's more that. It's, hey, whether or not we thought there were outs for this contract, in theory, the Giants were going to have Daniel Jones as their quarterback for 4 years. And in their minds, it was going to lead to an extension and Daniel Jones being the long-term solve. Maybe we're already getting a very clear indication like, listen, whatever happens in free agency, whatever happens in the draft, just know Daniel Jones is not going to be the starter another year from now. Daniel Jones is not going to be on this roster another year from now.
Right. It doesn't mean that they are drafting a quarterback at 6 or not drafting a quarterback at 6. It just means that they're not all the chips in the center. Just get a veteran backup that will never play behind Daniel Jones because we have faith in him. It's let's create contingency plans. Let's maybe look to the future in whatever round during the draft, or let's see in free agency if we could bring someone in that could be competition for Daniel Jones. So to me, I think it's just signaling like we're not just leaving him out there and saying he has, carte blanche to do whatever he wants. It's saying we got to find another plan some way, somehow.
John Fennelly, moving on, over on GiantsWire.com, had some coverage around an original Bucky Brooks take that looked at veteran QB on the market, and this is going back a week ago, so prior to the official release of one Russell Wilson, talking about highlighting, obviously, Joe Shane saying we will address the position. Again, it can be through free agency, and it doesn't preclude us from doing it in the draft as well. So we'll talk about free agency first and then get to JJ in the draft. On the NFL Network, Bucky Brooks said the two teams, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Giants would offer Denver Broncos quarterback a chance for a Super Bowl title. Now, point stop. Out of the two teams, which team do you think is better suited to offer Russ a short-term opportunity to win a Super Bowl? Before we talk about the contract, which is massive and critical in the way that it's structured, before we do that, though, if you were isn't Pittsburgh like the more viable option just because they've represented stability? Doesn't mean I think their personnel is the best or, all those different things. But the Pittsburgh Steelers have been a consistent playoff team. They usually have a winning record. They have Mike Tomlin well established. I don't know if it fits from a, personality standpoint, but I do think from a team standpoint, that would be the more attractive option. That's just a very quick quip before you get into Russ's contract.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pittsburgh is more established. Mike Tomlin basically never has a losing record in his entire career, so they're always in it. What I will say is, I don't know. I look at their division compared to where the Giants are. Like, I don't want to go too far into this because it'll be conspiracy theory stuff, but Lamar Jackson's not going anywhere, and the Ravens were the 1 seed. Joe Burrow's presumably going to be healthy. We'll see. I mean, the Cleveland Browns made it with a hodgepodge of quarterbacks with Joe Flacco playing. Like, that division is hard. Whereas the Giants and the Commanders are competing to see who's going to emerge. The Eagles lost Jason Kelsey and obviously took a step back. And who knows what's going to happen with Dak Prescott's cap hit. I'm not going to go too crazy, but I'm just saying, like,
but
Pittsburgh is a better spot. But when you think about, like, what's our path, maybe it's a little bit easier in the NFC East.
Okay, so Russell Wilson gets released, and everyone say, "Oh, this would be a chance to win a championship." Pittsburgh, the New York Giants, whether or not we believe in that, whatever. But the first thing you have is it's like, why, what are you going to sign him for? Russell Wilson. I mean, he's at the back end of his career, sure, but like you're not going to sign him for pennies on the dollar until you find out that his contract with the Denver Broncos was structured as such, Andy, as you'll break down. That it actually might not cost you anything to have Russell Wilson come join your franchise and help stabilize your QB position in the short term.
So this is one of those scenarios where the Giants are already paying Daniel Jones $40 million a year.
Where the Denver Broncos did everything wrong.
Right. Like if
Right.
any other quarterback comes on the free agent market, that you're like, the Giants are not in the business of doing that because it just doesn't make fiscal sense.
Right.
But the Russell Wilson situation is such a unique contract structure. I want to get your thoughts on whether the Giants should bring him in after I kind of give you a few different data points. So bear with me here.
Okay.
The Broncos owe Russell Wilson his $39 million salary for 2024. Any team that signs him is just offsetting the amount of money that the Broncos owe Russell Wilson and that organization owes Russell Wilson. So when you think about it, it's like, not only would Russell Wilson be able to stick it to the Broncos by like taking the lowest amount of money humanly possible, he's also allowing his new team to have as much cap space as humanly possible in order to do it. And so, Adam,
ordering
the veteran minimum
at the restaurant and then taking it to go with your other girlfriend.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It feels like a 2-for-1. And because the veteran minimum on this contract is $1.21 million to bring Russell Wilson in. So my first philosophical thing is, what other quarterback is going to be available at $1.21 million that has the cachet, that has had the tape and the play that Russell Wilson has? I think the answer is definitively no one, maybe.
Sure.
And here's where I'm going to go into things. And tell me when you want to jump in. Last year, 66% completion percentage, 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, with a 98 passer rating, which was good for 8th in the NFL. So, like, I don't know, that's decent. I'm not going to say that, like, you know, he was the 8th best quarterback in the NFL, but his 98 passer rating and those numbers seem pretty decent. The Giants would love to have had that play from any quarterback last year. The downside is he only played in 15 games and he took the most sacks in the NFL, which means he was holding on to the ball and was not the old Russell Wilson where the second he didn't have something, he would improvise and send off and go.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, knowing where Russell Wilson sits in terms of his numbers and his play, he's going to be he's 35 years old right now, and knowing that Russell Wilson costs $1.21 million and could be a competition for Daniel Jones at the quarterback position, are you in or are you out at the Giants saying, Russ, we would really like you to come in and compete?
Yeah, I mean, listen, was it 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions a year ago? Listen, you want to label him a bit of a, game manager, closer to a game manager than a game changer at this point of his career, sure. Obviously, 2 years ago when he first joined Denver, everybody kind of said, it was like, boy, looks a little stocky inside of that, QB flak jacket. And then it looked like he slimmed down this season. Now, it doesn't change the fact that the mobility does seem to be gone and that playing behind maybe a suspect offensive line could be damaging to his production. That being said, you never saw Daniel Jones come close to that type of stat line over the course of an entire season, even behind a suspect offensive line. Am I interested in him coming into the Giants? Sure. Do the one part that you mentioned there about to compete with Daniel Jones, that's not a real thing, though. Like, whether or not it could be, and the Giants could say, hey, veteran, because it's twofold. You don't have Russell Wilson say, hey, man, sign with us for the veteran minimum, stick it to the Denver Broncos, and then we'll see if you make the roster. That's not going to be the case. It's going to be, hey, I'm going to take next to nothing so we can bolster up this roster and do other things in free agency, and I'm the guy. Like, 35 years old, my track record. It's the equivalent of bringing in, he's not the same tier of quarterback in the end, but it's like bringing in Aaron Rodgers if you're the Jets. When you bring in a quarterback like this, there's at least a status associated with it, that there's an expectation. And by the way, I'm fine to have it be that it's Russell Wilson's job and Daniel Jones is a glorified backup getting paid $47 million this year. And if Russ got hurt and something went wrong, Daniel Jones gets a chance to show that he can still be a viable quarterback going forward. I wouldn't have any problem with it from a football standpoint. I do have some reservations from a person standpoint, because Russell Wilson, from everything I can tell, is a stone cold nutter. Like, Denver Broncos, let's ride, Mr. Unlimited. It's just, there's something going on there. And some of the best quarterbacks in the league are like this. So talent should override those concerns. But I do have real concerns about Denver, even at that big price point. They chose to walk away. They chose to say there's a real world where we will pay Russell Wilson $39 million to play somewhere else. That's a lot of money to spend to not have a quarterback in your room. And that's not about production on the field. It's not about wanting to draft your next QB and be ready to move forward. You made a choice saying it's not worth it to have Russell Wilson in here for the next couple of years while we groom a quarterback. That has to be alarming for any team considering him.
So, two things. One, Russell Wilson's dead cap is $85 million, which is more than double the next largest dead cap hit that any team has ever taken, which is insane to me. I've got a couple other crazy stats about this, just to level set here. Another one is, because the league year hasn't turned over yet, Russell Wilson's 5-year, $242 million contract he signed in September of 2022 with the Denver Broncos has not even kicked in yet. So, think about that. $250 million contract that he signed with that team still hasn't kicked in yet, and they're releasing him before it even starts. Mind-blowing. Did you know that Russell Wilson is also in the only person that appears on the biggest cap hit in the top 10 twice? He has the largest, and he also has the 5th or 6th largest when the Seattle Seahawks traded him to the Denver Broncos. So two teams have decided we're going to give up over $110 million worth of cap space to be able to jettison from this team. And so, there's a lot of things that are being said by both teams deciding to move on. Now, here's where I sit. I don't believe that there is a quarterback on the market that you can get the value of Russell Wilson for the veteran minimum. I just don't believe it. It's his unique contract structure that allows you to think about this and say, man, there's clearly not a better backup quarterback than Russell Wilson in the league, in my opinion. No one puts up 26 touchdowns, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But, Adam, think of it this way. Tyrod Taylor's cap hit last year was $6.5 million. You're getting Russell Wilson at 4 to 5x less than that. If you bring in any other backup quarterback in this league, it's going to cost you significantly more. So for me, if I'm the Giants, I'm thinking about any way that I can bring Russ in, knowing full well that you can get out of this thing with Russell Wilson and Daniel Jones in 1 year time. You're not providing any future commitments. You're thinking, how do I set up this wide receiver room the best way possible while using my free agent dollars elsewhere? That's how I'm thinking about it.
I agree with you in principle that it's not a long-term commitment, so why not do it? I still come back to the functionality of it and why Russell Wilson won't sign with the New York Giants, because there'll be some level of a team that is willing to make a commitment to him verbally or otherwise, but that is committed to giving him a real opportunity to win championships. I don't think the Giants are going to be structured that way. And you can say, hey, that's a part of the business, so be it. I also don't entirely agree, in spite of the numbers that we talk about from a year ago. Listen, if we're thinking about a QB manager and what that looks like and all those things, it'll cost you more. But 1.2 million versus, as we talked about before, seeing a Gardner Minshew get talked about. Now, maybe this number's probably gone up with the increased cap, but that was projected as, 2 years, $15 million fully guaranteed. It was okay, I'll sign up for that. Now, maybe it's 16 million, maybe it's 17 million now. Even at that point, while Gardner Minshew has never sniffed the success level of a Russell Wilson, you do have to consider the idea of diminishing returns. Is Russell Wilson getting slower? Is his arm strength getting away from him? Is he a nutter? These are things that really matter. And then and the disruption of it too, right? What if you bring in Russell Wilson for the vet minimum? He starts the season. He maybe tweaks his ankle a little bit. He's going to miss a game. Daniel Jones fills in, plays, decently. And now you have a legitimate thing. Because, by the way, if you're the New York Football Giants, what you can't do is go into this year and you're Brian Dable, Joe Shane, we need success this season. We need to be showing that this team's going the right way. And having Russell Wilson and Daniel Jones is not necessarily that factor. One more quick note, and then you can jump back in before we close out on Russ here. two quick things here. So first off, this is just from the Denver Broncos. On behalf of the Broncos, we thank Russell Wilson for his contributions and dedication to our team and community while wishing him the best as he continues his career. General Manager George Patton and Coach Sean Payton said in a joint statement. As we move forward, we are focused on building the strongest team possible in 2024 and beyond. We are excited to improve this offseason, and we'll have the flexibility to get better throughout the draft and free agency. Now, that was reported by Ian Rappaport. One note here. Russell Wilson was informed that he will be released by the Denver Broncos. However, he has not officially been released yet. The league year starts on the 13th. Okay, fine. Worth noting here that if you cut him pre-June 1, it's $85 million in dead cap. If you designate him a post-June 1 cut, then it's $35 million dead cap. There's zero cap savings, and you don't get hit with that punitive negative $1 million connotation around his contract, etc. The language of the contract in terms of how it moves going forward might still be the dollar-to-dollar match of what's owed to him, but I guarantee you, on the 13th, when we hear it, they're going to designate him post-June 1. There's no way that they're taking $85 million in dead cap when they can just time it correctly and get 35 and get.
No, Adam, no, I disagree with you. So it's been reported they are planning to take the $85 million cap hit as a pre-June 1 to make this year be like the clean up Russ's mistakes and take the big cap hit so that we're clean as possible moving forward. So like that's how crazy it is that they're releasing Russ. They're eating the $85 million this year against the cap.
Well, and I guess if you're a rebuilding team, you can say, right, like we're going to take a quarterback and having a ton of dead money won't matter to you. I think that's just objectively, that's terrible business to me, in my opinion. Like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face in some ways. And I'll go right back to the top of this. Like from an on-field production standpoint, would I have Russell Wilson on my team? Yes. From an everything else standpoint, I do not want the Giants to do this because clearly there is far more negative connotation attached to him inside the bill. Remember when he first got to Denver, what was it? I have my own offensive room and I talk to my own coaches. Like there were a lot of problems there. It seemed like Sean Payton maybe reined him back in towards being a part of the team, but it wasn't good enough or strong enough in order for them to be willing to stay committed to just paying him money and not taking these massive dead cap hits. It is too much here to even consider the idea of him coming in, even as a veteran minimum deal. Let's just end on that with Russ. I would not, with everything being considered, I'm not bringing Russell Wilson in at a veteran minimum to the New York Football Giants this offseason. Are you?
I am bringing him in at the veteran minimum because I just don't think the Giants can get the same type of value from a contract for a quarterback elsewhere. You mentioned Gardner Minshew, probably $7 million a year. The other thing that we'll mention as we move forward is the fact that like if the sixth pick in the NFL draft is slotted at about $6.02 million. So if you do end up taking a quarterback at 6, maybe there's one specific that the Giants are getting related to. Right. You're talking about having 50 something million dollars tied up into the wide receiver room. And it's like, I know it starts planning for the future, but if you can clear your books off of someone like Russell Wilson and still slightly be competitive this year and clear yourself off of Daniel Jones at the end of this year, you can kind of start fresh and not have all this baggage. Just one way to think about it.
Sure, you can definitely talk about it that way, but I just think that there's, I don't know, if you wanted to go that route, I think you're talking about accepting another disastrous season. It might, like, at least the potential of that increases greatly, and I think that's something that the Giants are trying to mitigate. That being said, it's certainly a talking point, and it's certainly fascinating to watch how things unfold this offseason and what other teams get interested, right? By the way, free agent quarterbacks, the draft, there's a world where Russell Wilson is waiting to see how things play out for different organizations and trying to pick his spot. I'll be very fascinated to see how teams feel about Russ on the open market. J.J. McCarthy. We turn our attention over to the draft. That's where it becomes interesting because there's been talks, there's been rumors, there's been speculation about what the Giants intend to do when it comes to the draft. Here's another version of this where Andy refuses to believe what people are saying out there across the NFL landscape, or maybe he does believe it this time. You believe the narrative that the Giants want to move up potentially to get a quarterback, right?
Oh, no, I don't know if I necessarily believe it. I think that Joe Schoen is doing his due diligence. Like, what's it cost to move up? What's the going rate to move back?
Top, though. It's rumored that the Giants are thinking about it or trying to potentially move up to get a quarterback. That part of it you're okay with, but the part of it where the Giants are done with Daniel Jones, you don't absorb that information at face value, but you absorb Giants are considering moving up at face value.
So I don't think so. Here's where I think maybe the disconnect for you and I is.
Okay.
Everyone else is drawing the conclusions by Joe Schoen saying what does it cost to move up? What's the cost to go back? What just so I know how much the going rate is everywhere else. That everyone immediately thinks, well, the Giants are desperate need of getting a quarterback. They're out on Daniel Jones. Like, I think that Joe Shane seems like a guy that wants to know what every team is willing to give him for the sixth pick, and
Sure.
also wants to know what it would cost to go to 2, 3, 4, 5, because he wants all of the information available to him. So,
Okay.
like,
Yeah, that's fair.
I also believe that a lot of people could turn around and say Daniel Jones' injury history plus his play, it's logical that they want to move on from him because he didn't look good. He looks skittish in the pocket. I can totally appreciate the idea that it could be the sentiment inside the building. What I'm saying is it wouldn't make sense for Joe Shane or the Giants to put that out there if it was true, because it hurts their opportunity to get the quarterback that they want in the future. So all of it can be true. I just don't like the idea that there's like, is all this scuttlebutt coming from inside the building or outside the building? I saw Justin Pennick from Talking Giants said the exact same thing yesterday. It's like, who is this coming from? Is it people that are looking at the team being like, yeah, they got to move on from Jones? Or is it Joe Shane being like, put the word out, we're back up, like we need a quarterback? Like, that to me is the biggest question mark about all this.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, and listen, the truth lies somewhere muddled in the middle, I think, and I think that however you want to frame it, whether it's we want to get tea leaves out there and see how other teams are feeling, or it kind of leaks out a little bit. I guess my sense would be it again. It all ends up being narrative driven on a. Remember, what was it a week ago? Giants wide receiver. That's good. Oh, they need the weapon. They need the weapon. They did that for 2-3 weeks. Now we're on to QBs, and oh my goodness, are they going to move up for QBs? What's the cost going to be? We just came out of the combine. These quarterbacks look good. What about Penix? Right next week, it's going to be now Joe Alt. Like, why don't we talk about Joe Alt? He's right there in the top 5, top 6. What if he falls to the Giants at 6? They don't want to take him. He's clearly the best offensive lineman in the draft. Like, all these things get their legs, and they all get kind of sorted out. And I think it's good to do it because you start to get a sense of like, well, would I move up for JJ? Would I stand pat? Did a Dunze just give me a combine that makes me change my idea about where I value which players and which positions? You have to have that discussion. Do you think that JJ, because we came out of the combine, I said it looked fine. An interesting thing somebody had about, I think maybe you sent me this, refresh my mind about off scripted plays. What was it like? JJ McCarthy had one of the better stats when it came to kind of like getting the job done when it came down to it and getting that pass off well. He actually graded out far better than anybody else in this draft class from a QB spot.
Yeah, he did. There was a pressure rate, under pressure,
Pressure
like
rate.
type of,
Thank you.
of throws, and it just showed like where some of them stand, which is important for the Giants because Daniel Jones under pressure hasn't been the best of all of them.
That's
But it
right.
kind of just talked about like incompletions versus a pass batted down versus a completion, and like what those pressure points look like. And JJ McCarthy was significantly higher than most people. Second on that list was actually Bo Nix, surprisingly, in terms of pressure. I mean, he's been around the block for like 6 to 7 years in college, so you would expect him to have that poise. But it's just an interesting another data point to be able to say, like, how do these people handle pressure in a certain way? Caleb Williams was kind of in middle of the road. Drake May was kind of in the middle of the road. Jaden Daniels was actually on the lower end of the top 10 quarterbacks expected to be drafted. So, just another data point. Just like everyone talks about Michael Penix and his injury history, and like
Sure.
people want to draft Michael Penix, it's like, if you wanted to draft someone like Jaden Daniels and he has the worst pressure, completion percentage of all the top 10 quarterbacks, like, these are data points that you have to actually scrutinize and say, like, do the data points match up to the film? Do we want to take this person or not?
That being the case, let's close out on take a journey with me down mock draft road here. I'm going to do live ones. We've done these in the years past. Everyone seems to like to get in there and have those conversations, and we play out in real time where things are going. So be sure to follow us on YouTube at One Giant Podcast, because I think this year I want to try to, if we get enough people in, say, here we are at pick 6. Do we want to stay? Do we want to trade back? Did we want to trade up? And let the voting kind of dictate the way we go through some of these mocks. But I go ahead and I get over there and I run a mock. And here's one for you. Apparently, now this goes a little bit against the way narratives are standing right now, but they say Chicago Bears, we're going all in on Justin Fields because they have him drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. with the first overall pick. Caleb Williams goes second to division rival Washington. Drake May ends up going to the New England Patriots at 3. Neighbors goes 4 to the Arizona Cardinals. Joe Alt goes 5 to the Chargers. And then a funny thing happens. I didn't do this. They came to me. The Chicago Bears knocked down my door and said, we'd love to trade up from 9 with you. I say, what are you talking about? Pick up an extra first round pick the following year, and they come and get, because they're going with Justin Fields, Bowers, tight end. Like they are all in on giving this kid weapons and making it happen. Now, all I do is bide my time and wait. Where at this point, at pick number 9, I can make my choice, actually. I ended up going with Jaden Daniels because that feels like a name that's been mentioned a lot. You want JJ, he's on the board too. So you get your quarterback in the first round after trading back down, and I'll just give you the overall coverage. 39, I take Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle, Arizona. 47, I take Edrin Cooper, linebacker, Texas A&M. At 70, I get Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina, and I go ahead and take an athletic freak at the running back position. 108, Jalen Wright, running back out of Tennessee. The way that I do these things, Andy, how I give Joe Schoen the roadmap, it's just a matter of him taking the phone call. Pick up the phone, Joe. I've got it all sorted out. I do need Chicago to make some active decisions here to have this happen.
Well, but listen, I mean, it's not, your draft path is not as crazy as you think it is. Now, obviously, it's already reported that Caleb Williams will go to the Bears. But
yeah,
what I mean, you expect Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Drake May to go in the top 3 or 4 anyway. So, like, the top of the board, whether it's the Bears having Fields or not, like, kind of plays out the way that we think. And if there is a team, I mean, could the Bears move up for Joe Alt? Could they move up for Brock Bowers? Like, there's a whole host of people that they could potentially move up for. So it's not that crazy. And I think you and I are both in agreement that, like, we still feel pretty more confident in the Giants trading back in the draft to accumulate more assets than moving up in the draft and drafting the 3rd or 4th best quarterback in this group. Yep. And so, like, I have no qualms. And that's the whole thing. I think, you know, obviously I've been a supporter of Daniel Jones for quite a while. I have no problem if the Giants want to get their quarterback of the future in the first round. I just feel like if you want JJ McCarthy, it feels like 6 is such a steep price when Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and other, like, guys that you can pretty much say, I have pretty good confidence they're going to be Pro Bowlers, are going to be there for the Giants. Overall, your draft is sound. I still feel like Xavier Legette, is not necessarily a wide receiver 1. They're probably still searching in free agency for someone like that. But overall, Adam, I think you did a pretty good job.
And that's it. I mean, listen, it's less about the accolades, although I appreciate it, and more, as you say, just setting this kind of path that can go forward here for the Giants. And remember, this scenario results in getting another first-round pick. And I think this is why you and I talk about the trade-back scenario, because at a high level, we look at this team and say, we've got a ways to go here. This can be a great offseason, but we're still maybe going to be another year away from being high-level competitive, concrete playoff team. And that's okay. It's going to be hard in the short term for fans, but you want to make sure you make the smart big picture decisions. That being the case, tomorrow we're going to talk about offensive linemen. Oh, baby, do we need to talk about offensive linemen? Are there paths here at the top of the draft for the Giants to solidify them? How willing are they to spend big draft capital or free agent money? What's the combination that gets them there? And we'll touch on other key positions as well coming out of that combine as we continue our coverage, not to mention Saquon Barkley. The tag deadline is happening sometime today right now. You'll see this episode before, hopefully. And then if it breaks and it's something substantial, we'll dive into that as well. Until next time, you get us on YouTube at One Giant Podcast, on Twitter at AndyMac214, at Adam Armbrecht, and at One Giant Podcast. Read me over on Substack. Until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.